GameCube.
I want to just start off by saying that the French version of Pokémon Winds is called Pokémon Vents, and I just thought that was really funny. So we just wrapped up another Pokémon Presents, which are essentially Nintendo Directs, but exclusively for Pokémon. And this was a pretty big one because this coincided with the franchise's 30th anniversary. So expectations were definitely pretty high for this one. And as we typically expect with these presentations, we don't particularly get anything exciting throughout 90% of the runtime, and the thing that most people actually care about is saved towards the end. And that's not to say there wasn't anything interesting shown. The first thing they showed off was a recreation of the original Game Boy, and you can insert a bunch of tiny recreations of Pokemon Red and Blue cartridges to play individual songs from those old games. These cartridges only contain 20-second to 1-minute songs on them. This package is $70. Moving on. Pokemon XD Gale of Darkness was announced to be the next game to be hitting Nintendo Switch Online through the GameCube app, which is really strange. This is the sequel to Pokemon Colosseum, and you're releasing this first? Why? They properly confirmed Pokemon Home support for the Fire Red and Leaf Green re-releases on Switch for real now, and learning that they add in the original event exclusive tickets that allowed you to get Deoxys, Ho-Oh, and Lugia back in the day, I think I could safely say, yeah, I probably will be picking up, more specifically, Leaf Green version because I just want to have a Sandslash on my team. And Pokemon Champions looks like a particularly interesting game. Yeah, this is obviously made for mobile first, but this seems like it'll have enough depth for a battle simulator, so I'm interested in trying it. But of course, the big thing that people care about here is Generation 10, Pokémon Winds and Pokémon Waves. And I'd like to make clear that this is coming from the perspective of someone that absolutely adores Pokémon Gens 3, 4, and 5 in particular, but started to fall off quite a bit in the 3DS era, and then just not even bothering with the Switch era. So take that information for what you will. I'm looking at this from someone who wants to get back into Pokemon and has only observed it from a distance for the longest time. With the exception of Pokemon Shining Pearl, I did play that for a nostalgia kick, and nearly everyone considers these to be the worst Pokemon games ever made for being incredibly lazy remakes. I kind of liked BTSP, but I was interested to see what Gen 10 was going to look like because I wanted to find some way to get me somewhat invested in this series again. And looking at the footage that we've seen so far, honest to God, this actually looks pretty dang good. You gotta understand that this is coming after the Switch era where Pokemon was just rushing their games to meet deadlines and tie in with merchandise and the anime and trading cards. And it showed real hard in the case of Pokemon Sword and Shield, and especially Scarlet and Violet, which launched at a basically unacceptable state. And whether or not you like any of those generations is kind of irrelevant. The fact of the matter is that Pokemon was just so infinitely behind on the times and wasn't adapting at all to the stronger power that is necessary in order for games to properly function on new hardware with really strict development times and graphics that did not impress at all. But you probably heard that story to death by now. I will not bore you with a spiel about it. The bottom line is the 3-year pattern was clearly doing way more damage to the series' reputation than it should have. So when it was announced that they were not doing the 3-year release anymore and just made Pokemon Legends ZA the big holiday title instead for 2025, regardless of how that game looked, it did give me just a little bit of hope that they would actually listen to fans for once and take their time to make the next generation actually presentable. And sure enough, I was right. These games actually look pretty dang decent. I genuinely feel like I could go around and explore this world and not have my suspension of disbelief corrupted by insane pop-ins or just really low quality textures. This feels like a living, breathing world that they put a lot of time and effort into. Are these the best looking Nintendo games I've ever seen? No, I think that stuff like Breath of the Wild, Metroid Prime 4, and Pikmin 4 are quite a bit more impressive by comparison, but I also don't think anyone was asking for a Pokemon game that looked like Elden Ring either. These games look like they're gonna look and run fine, and that's the most important thing here. And considering that they announced that the games are gonna be released in 2027 instead of the holiday season in 2026 like I expected them to, that only gives me more hope that these games are actually going to really impress. And that's just generally really healthy for Pokemon in general, because my goodness, the budget for a Super Bowl commercial should not be higher than the actual games. Even if we ignore the technical stuff, I also just really like the setting of the games. I've always been fascinated by the wonders of the ocean and traveling across different islands in general, and they seem to be putting in a good amount of effort to make exploring these islands actually engaging. And based on what we saw at the end of the trailer, it seems like there's a lot of interesting stuff you're going to be able to do underwater, which is really fascinating for me. Diving underwater and exploring the coves was one of my favorite things about Pokemon Ruby back in the day, and they seem to be expanding on that, which is really freaking cool. And on top of all of that, I also really like the starter Pokemon here. Typically, there are one or two that I'm not really a fan of, but that's not the case here. There's not a single one that I don't like, at least in their baby forms. We got Brout, the Grass Bean Chick Pokemon, Pombom, the Fire Puppy Pokemon, and forgive me if I'm mispronouncing this last one, Gekwa, the Water Gecko Pokemon. Ask me on a different day and I'll probably have a new favorite, but right now I'm kinda leaning towards Gekwa, mainly because I have a feeling that their final evolution is gonna be really freaking sick. And you're free to quote me on that in case I'm proven wrong, so you can laugh in my face about it. And they also seem to be doing some interesting things with Pikachu in particular, because exploring the Pokemon website, those Pikachu at the beginning of the trailer were not for show. They seem to be actual characters with actual names, Mr. Windychew and Miss Wavychew. I'm particularly curious as to what their roles are going to be in these games. But that's all I can really say about Pokemon Winds and Waves for now, because they kept a lot of information really vague, and I'm not one that really likes to speculate on what's to come these days. I'd rather just let what happens happen than go from there. But overall, yeah, I could genuinely say that this is the first time I'm interested in new Pokemon games in a decade now, and they're genuinely making me want to invest myself back into the series, to replay some of my favorites from back in the day, and explore some of the side games that I missed. Like, I picked up new Pokemon Snap not too long ago, and I'm interested in giving that a shot. But yeah, it genuinely does me good to know that Game Freak and the Pokemon Company seem to be actually trying with the franchise again, and I'm gonna be very curious over the many months ahead to follow these games' releases and pick one of them up myself. Unless these games are $80 or they're on Game Key cards, in which case I will just stick to the Persona comfort bubble forever and ever. But the only question left on my mind at this point is, with these games releasing in 2027, what's gonna be Nintendo's big holiday title for this year? Mayhaps we finally see that new 3D Mario game after all this time? Honestly, anything to keep Nintendo Land off of Suicide Watch is a good thing in my book. God bless and have a good one. Bye bye!